Hello, I'm Juliana Molnar, an occupational therapist with Livonia Public Schools. And our topic in this session is making sense of sensory function. And I want to first talk about how sensory strategies are something that every person uses in their daily life, and you probably don't even realize that you're doing it. You use them to calm when you're upset, you use them to alert yourself when you feel drowsy, and they're sort of instinctive. If you think about an experience you may have had in the past where you were driving late at night and you were getting tired and you felt like you probably needed to stop, but you were maybe 2 hours from home and you thought, I'd rather just push on through to get home. What are some things that you might do in the car to help yourself wake up? People instinctively know that they would do things like put the window down, to have air whistling through the car, or to turn the temperature in the car lower, to turn loud radio music on, or something, not soothing, but something more like fast-paced, or, hard rock music, something they could sing along to. Some people say they would put something in their mouths to help them alert, something crunchy or something tart. They might keep a companion awake to help them speak and stay alert in that way. So there's lots of ways that you instinctively would keep yourself awake when you're getting drowsy and it's a matter of safety on the road. Here are some examples of sensory things that we all use in our lives all the time. And this is a way to sort of sort them so that you can think some things are calming and other things are alerting, and you know that instinctively, that tart candy will be alerting. The pop is alerting because of all the bubbles. Fast or loud music. On the other hand, things like low lights and a rocking chair, we instinctively know so that those are going to be calming things. Sometimes I suggest to people that when they think about calming things, think about a baby. Things that you would do with a baby, like rocking a baby in your arms, that's linear movement. So linear movement goes back and forth, and it affects our heads and our balance in that way. Low lights, soft voices, those kinds of things that you would use to calm a baby are calming for all people. I had the privilege of working with a young man named Dan, and our therapy centered on we worked in the SAC room at school, which is the school-age childcare room, and it's deserted during the school day while kids are in school, and then it's very busy before school and after school. So it was an empty room that had lots of things like beanbag chairs, couches, video games, lots of different toys and things like that in there. So we used these things, and Dan had the insight to be able to tell me, once we found all the things that he liked to do, things that were alerting, indicated by the arrow pointing up, and things that were calming, indicated by the arrow pointing down. So we were able to figure out for him personally what things could calm and what things could alert him. So this is just to show you that people are used to using these sensory strategies, and it is individualized to each person. I want you also just to notice at this point that chewing gum is on both lists. It's both alerting and calming. And we'll talk about that later, but I can mention at this point, if you are listening to a lecture in a lecture hall and you chew gum, you might do that to help you stay awake and alert yourself. It's a lot of input to your big TMJ joint back here, and also something like the peppermint would probably be kind of alerting in gum. Now, if you were giving a big lecture and you had a lot of people in your audience, you might also chew gum ahead of time to help you calm. You might be kind of keyed up, and chewing, again, that input to the joint helps calm also. So I just want to show that some things can kind of do both things. They can be universal for all people. They can be sort of optimizing. Instead of just alerting or calming, they can kind of be universal and bring all people to a functional level that's somewhere in the middle. So I always like to draw this distinction between what we're doing at school and sensory integration, because sensory integration is kind of a buzzword that people use a lot. It's a form of therapy, and it's not exactly what we do in school. To be technical, sensory integration is a model of practice in occupational therapy, and it's actually our one of our best researched areas in occupational therapy. It's a very effective intervention, and we have a lot of research to back that up. It happens in a clinic, and it's directed by the child, meaning that it's directed by the child's interests and the things that they like to do, their motivations, and the therapist has to creatively find a way to build what is therapeutically needed around the child's interest. It is goal-oriented, meaning we don't just do it, we want to integrate the senses. We want to integrate the senses for function. So we're goal-oriented in that way, and we're trying to build the student's capacity in either physically or from a sensory point of view. It is frequent, meaning at least once a week, and long-term, meaning several months before we would expect to see issues resolving. And it features intense sensory experiences. This is what a sensory clinic looks like. This is a really nice, fun-looking one. You can see there's suspended equipment, and the equipment in this gym is suspended from 2 points, offering an opportunity for linear movement, like I talked about earlier. That's movement that goes back and forth, the same way you would rock a little baby. So that's going to be a calming input. But there's also lots of alerting, fun things to do here. Climbing, sliding, falling, alley-ooping over equipment, hanging from one's arms, which is tremendously organizing, and lots of opportunities for games to be set up. This is a student in a Lycra swing that hangs from probably 1 point, and when a swing hangs in 1 point, that means that it can go back and forth, but it can also go side to side, it can rotate, and it can go in an orbital way, which is like the front is always the front, but the swing can move around like that. So lots of different planes of movement. You can also stand up in a swing like this, or lay in it like a hammock and get into the fetal position. Or what she's doing here is prone extension, and that's helping her work on the muscles of her back and neck to help her lift her head and upper back against gravity. And it's very motivating and fun. And frequently, when I worked in a sensory integration clinic, we would set up a puzzle or a bunch of Beanie Babies on the floor, and the child would swing around and reach out and grab things. And the idea is that it's so fun and motivating that the student really doesn't even realize they're working. That's what we're going for in all of OT, is that we've created a challenge that's hard enough to be interesting, easy enough to have some success, and working on the goals in a way that maybe the students don't even realize they're working. Here's a guy having an intense sensory experience in the OT clinic with shaving cream on an incline. That's awesome. And somebody enjoying water play. Here's a student on a positioning bolster, and again working on the muscles of his back and neck and holding him upright against gravity. And the therapist has created a challenge in front of him that involves reaching and eye-hand coordination and all of those other good things going on in the sensory integration clinic. Here's someone having an intense climbing experience. We do have some climbing experiences at school, but sometimes not as high and sometimes not as challenging with this kind of a rope ladder kind of a setup. Oh, I'm going to back it up and just mention, I think it should be obvious from what you're seeing here why we don't have sensory integration proper in school. Because the movement experiences are so intense, and some of them really are very alerting to the point where it would not be appropriate for kids in school. Generally, we're trying to bring people to a just right place, as they are in a sensory clinic, but we don't have as much time and as much leeway to work on therapy because students need to be in classrooms. So yes, that's our next question. What about adults? Is this just a childhood concern? And the fact is, adults have sensory needs also, and when you see people doing extreme sports, this may be an expression of their need for adrenaline, for moving their head in space, for movements, for strong visual input, movement input, moving their head through space, using their muscles to lift their body weight. Wow. Intense movement experiences. So adults, the answer is adults have sensory needs too. So sensory strategies are what we go for in school, and we again, sensory is not an end unto itself. We're always trying to get the kid organized so that he can perform self-care and citizenship tasks and, of course, educational tasks. So if you're like me, what you were taught in school is that we have 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. But we actually have more senses than that, 7 senses or 8, depending on how you want to look at it. But the ones that are not talked about as often are proprioception and vestibular sense. So proprioception is, the receptors for that are in your muscle spindles and in your joints, and they give you awareness of how your body is moving. So for example, if you put your, let's say, put your right arm into a sort of like a muscle building, like showing off your muscles. So bring your shoulder up to 90 degrees away from your body and your elbow on your right side to 90 degrees, and then make a big fist and pop your muscle out. You can close your eyes and match that pose on the other side of your body. And you can do it very easily. And the way you're doing that is using feedback from your muscles and joints. So that's what proprioceptive is all about. It's your awareness of your own body position or movement, which would add the yet another sense. Then there's the vestibular sense, and that's your awareness of your head's movement in space. And that is something that is, the receptors are in the inner ear, and they sense movement, and generally they turn on when the movement turns on, and then they kind of switch off. Like, for example, when you take off in a car, your head tells you that you're moving forward in space, but then it kind of is quiet and it doesn't continue telling you you're moving forward in space. Everything kind of continues, and then when you stop and your head goes forward, you get another message that your head has stopped moving through space. It's closely tied to balance, and it's closely tied to vision. I can prove to you that it's closely tied to vision if you think about if you've been at a stop sign, or a stoplight, and suddenly you realize that your car is rolling, and you look down at your brake and think, my foot's on the brake. Why is my car rolling? And then you realize your car isn't rolling. It's the truck next to you is probably out of gear and just rolling backwards a little bit, and it gave you the sense of movement even though you're not moving. I love this chart. It's from an excellent program called How Does Your Engine Run? I like the Leader's Guide for that. The Williams and Schellenberger, How Does Your Engine Run? A Leader's Guide. And this is an example of, a chart of your central nervous system. And it shows the 3 foundational senses on the bottom as tactile, vestibular, and proprioception. Tactile, your relationship to your immediate surroundings. What is touching your skin? Vestibular, your connection to Mother Earth and to gravity. And proprioception, your relationship to your own body. What position are you in? Those are the 3 foundational things that you are always going to be your top priorities as you make your way around this world. Then we have the other sensory systems that you're familiar with: taste, hearing, visual, and smell. But as you move up the pyramid, the next section says sensory motor development. And it shows things like your ability to screen input. In other words, your ability to figure out what is salient in the environment, what you need to be paying attention to, and what you can screen out. For example, if there's a light buzzing in the room where you are and there's someone speaking, you listen to the person who's speaking and you try to screen out the buzzing sound. Reflex maturity, meaning that when you start to fall over, you reach out with your hands to catch yourself. Or conversely, sometimes we have baby reflexes, like a stepping reflex or movement of the arms, kind of a reflex that becomes reintegrated as we mature, and then that we're not bound by just reflexive movements anymore. We can do more complex volitional movements. So again, moving up, we see perceptual motor development, and this is things where we're like auditory language skills, adjusting our posture in subtle ways. But at the very top of this pyramid is really where we normally try to intervene with kids. What we're looking for is good classroom behavior, daily living activities, being able to do the self-care things, and then academic learning. So these are the issues. This is the issues where we intervene a lot of times with kids, or this is where we have our presenting concerns, and actually the problem is coming from way at the bottom of the pyramid, where there may be some confusion about relationship to earth, relationship to self, and relationship to immediate physical surroundings. So each of the sensory systems kind of has a dichotomy. There's one side that alerts and the other side that provides more detailed information. For example, if you see something out of the corner of your eye, which is also known as peripheral vision, that would alert you because it might be a bumblebee, or it might be someone running toward you that's going to knock you over. So generally when you see something in your peripheral vision over here, you would tend to turn your head and bring whatever's going on over there into your focal vision, into the center part of your eye, where you can discriminate about what's going on over there. Oh, that's John. I've already said hi to him this morning. I don't need to pay attention at this time. It's okay that he's walking around in the same environment as me. I don't have to do anything about that. Or, hey, it's a bee. I do have to do something about that. I want to move away. So each of our sensory systems does that. For example, the tactile system, light moving touch that is unpredictable and moves on your arm, same thing. It's designed to be alerting. It's designed to get your attention and get you paying attention. And then pressure input is the kind of input that gives you information. So an example of that would be, so we have a nice technical term for it. It's a beautiful word, stereognosis. If you reach down into your purse and you want a specific lipstick, no, not the one with slightly round, squared edges, and no, not the one that's really short, and no, not this key ring, and not this other thing over here, but this is the lipstick, not the chapstick, this is the lipstick I want. You can do all of that with your hand by squeezing things in your purse. Pressure input gives you information. That's the same thing that happens if you're in a situation where there's cobwebs and the cobwebs get on you. Your impulse is to push, to smooth that out and give pressure input to shut off the alerting that you feel when the cobwebs get on you. Lots of references to bugs. So for every sensory event, there's an appropriate response. If you touch the stove, the appropriate response is to snatch your hand back and say, ouch, that really hurt. And maybe you would run water on it or give it a squeeze, again, to help calm and organize. Now, if you were to accidentally touch the stove and then you fell onto the ground and started screaming and rocking in the fetal position for a half an hour, that would be too much reaction to the sensory events. And on the other side of that, if you put your hand on the burner and you just left it there even though it was hot and you never moved your hand, that would be too little. So there is always a just right response to what's going on in the environment. And so what we're shooting for is a just right kind of a response. So these are some common issues that I see in my practice in the schools. I work with preschool students, and if you're watching this, your student is probably someone that I know. So a couple ways we can go with tactile issues. One is lack of awareness, like I just talked about. So this is like students who maybe don't have as much awareness of pain, or they're not very accurate in how they use their hands. They may not be getting accurate signals from the body about where they're being touched and how they are touching. Also, tactile defensiveness would be defined as a emotional reaction to a non-noxious input. So this means the child who's standing in line and someone brushes up against them, again with that light moving touch that we talked about, they may immediately put their dukes up, ready for a fight. So this is a child who reacts emotionally and defensively to something that is really not a big deal to the rest of us, but their alerting in response to tactile input is disordered. So this is the student we want to have a little bit more space in the classroom. We may seat him right next to the teacher so that he doesn't have to be right in the mix with the kids. This is somebody who may have trouble in the lunchroom with the close quarters. They sit very close to one another in there. They may have trouble in line, or they may be chosen for the caboose or the line leader so that they don't have to have a kid on every side of them. Ball pits are a great place to work on tactile issues. The weight of the child's own body drives these plastic balls into the body. So you can imagine they press hard against the skin that's touching them, and that is a desensitizing feeling. So you're getting that pressure input that helps you understand what's going on around you, and it calms the hyper-reactiveness to light moving touch. So ball pits are a fun place to play and a safe place to play. Also, for persons who have tactile defensiveness, I think that it's really nice to provide them sometimes with a tent. So sometimes in classrooms we have tents. The thing on the right is an adorable pop-up tent, really fancy one that looks like the circus. But what's nice about that is when you get in there, you know when someone's going to get next to you tactily. It's not like somebody's going to sneak up on you from behind. So those can be really good places for people with tactile defensiveness. Same thing on the left here. This is our climbing mountain. We love this piece of equipment, and it kind of has two hidey holes. One underneath by that rope ladder, which kids frequently go in there when they're not ready to leave the room. They go underneath there, so it's harder for us to get them in line. And then if you climb up halfway, you can see that there's another little place to hide in there. So that's also something to mention. Also in the background, I see a swing. That's a fancy swing that hangs from one point, a frog swing. But any kind of playground swing or swinging is a really nice way for a kid to be with kids, doing things with kids, playing the games and being part of the playground scene, but also not having to deal with light moving touch from other kids. It's good stuff. This is a surgical scrub brush. Sometimes this is part of what they call the Wilbarger protocol, and this is something that we use sometimes with people who have hypersensitive skin. The idea, these surgical scrub brush has very, very soft bristles, plastic bristles. They're extra soft, and when we use this, we try to cover a lot of the skin at once. And we try to do it so firmly that the bristles lay all the way over, so that we're providing, again, pressure touch, not light moving touch. And we do arms, legs, back, try to cover a lot of ground in just a few seconds, maybe under 30 seconds to do the whole body. And we can do that right over the clothing. And we try to hold the clothing steady so that we're not creating what we call scramble or static, where clothing is sliding around and now all of a sudden we're back into scratchy tags and other things that may create an unpredictable light moving touch. We don't want to do that to kids. So the opposite of that would be to provide this pressure touch with this brush. And the idea is that it takes the hypersensitivity down a big notch. That in the Wilbarger protocol is followed with joint compressions over the whole body. If you ever want to try such a thing, I'll be more than happy to orient you to how this is done. But I think there's a lot of magic in the joint compressions too, and sometimes kids can even do their own joint compressions by jumping on a trampoline or a rebounder, which gives them a nice joint compression kind of over the whole body. Not so artificial. Media tables, this is one we call a sand and water table. You can put water in it, you can put sand in it, you can put shaving cream in it, you can put those little Orbeez gel beads in there, you can put pumpkin with pumpkin guts, you can put snow. We put all sorts of things in our sand and water tables at school, and kids are getting exposed to this all the time. And sometimes it's a tough place to play for people who have tactile defensiveness, and what we do in that case is we stick a tool in their hand. Here are tongs, a big spoon, a pitcher or a bucket to scoop with, or a chopstick. We give kids lots of tools so that they can see that it's fun, and we never force, we just try to entice and make it a super fun place to play. And I watch kids get over this hurdle all the time. Some kids come in so aversive, and then, boy, they're right over there. So kids really do learn from this, and they develop. Other tactile toys that come up in school, obviously we want people to be able to handle things that are gloppy and squishy and sticky and all the rest of it. All right, proprioceptive. Some things that we sometimes see that affect the proprioceptive system are kids who seek very vigorous input, and I love the kids who are very rough and tumble kind of kids, and I think that roughhouse play is great at home. Lots of dads have that kind of awesome wrestly kind of input, which is really, really valuable. Obviously, we can't do that at school for all of the reasons you can imagine, but it is a nice kind of input for the kid to have in their life. You need to set some rules about it. There's no hitting, and there needs to be like a safe word. In my family, the safe word was Dorito. If anybody said Dorito, we pulled back immediately and stopped the roughhouse play. We also I very frequently see kids with low muscle tone, and muscle tone is an issue that is separate from strength. It means that it is the level of relative laxity or tightness of muscles when they're at neutral. So this child with low tone may tend to hold their face or their body or their muscles more slack than the kid next to them when they're at rest or at neutral. And then when I guess what I mean to say is at rest, because then they need to recruit a lot of muscle strength to get to a neutral place, and then they really have to work to keep it at neutral. So sometimes you'll see kids with their neck tight or their shoulders tight or hanging on to things, or just know that the student who has sort of a soft look to their face, to their cheeks, to their muscles, or the child who tends to drape himself over a chair or sink into caregivers or is especially lovey and they kind of tend to hang on people, that can be an expression of low muscle tone. And that child is having to work harder than the kids next to him to maintain neutral. So obviously the place where this manifests itself is standing in line and sitting in a desk, or maintaining, for little kids, maintaining neutral in a circle time situation. Then we have the kids who are proprioceptive avoidant, and this is the kid who needs to recruit muscle tone to hold something heavy, and instead they just collapse and they don't tend to recruit that muscle tone. So you hand them something to write with and their hand just kind of goes soft. So I frequently see kids, and for this one you really have to come up with some great motivators that they're going to want to get involved with. Here's an example of what low muscle tone looks like. This is one of my students on the left, and you can see that there's a lot of what we call laxity of ligaments, meaning that the ligaments that hold the bones together in her legs are very loose, and to the point where her legs are actually bending backward. I kind of thought of her as like a flamingo. This little guy on the right has low muscle tone also. You can see that his mouth is a little bit slack. He has an open mouth posture and soft cheeks, soft hands, soft little fingers, and he's still a little guy. But what he's done to compensate for a trunk that has a hard time maintaining neutral and then reacting dynamically to small changes in the environment, like if somebody threw him a ball, he would need to change his posture a little bit. If he's having trouble doing that, he can compensate by creating a wider base of support with his legs. We call this position W sitting, and he's taking advantage of that laxity of ligaments that we see in the little child on the other side of the screen. Those joints are so loose that he can kind of set himself up with a stable base, and then the trunk doesn't have to really react dynamically, and he doesn't have to recruit and maintain muscle strength to kind of turn his trunk on. He can kind of shut it off in this position. So this position isn't recommended. When we see kids in this position, we help them get into like a crisscross applesauce and we say, fix your legs. We love to use these at school. The brand name for this is Jet Step. And the idea is that the front two legs of the school chair go into that slot, and then we've got a chair that's just right for the child. The position that we're seeking is 90 degrees at the hips, 90 degrees at the knees, and 90 degrees at the ankles. And you can see we've really achieved it with this little guy. Sometimes you'll see kids sitting and they will look so slack, and then when they get this underneath their feet, that they just sit right up, and it's almost like everything kind of turned on. They look like a student all of a sudden. If you have situations where your kid is really having trouble sitting in a chair, I recommend making sure that their feet are well supported and that they're achieving this 90-90-90 position. For proprioceptive, we also like animal walks. This guy is doing what we call a bear walk on the soles of his feet and the palms of his hands. And then if you flip it over, you've got a crab walk. It's exhausting for adults, but kids can do it. It's exhausting for people with low muscle tone too. That's why you have to provide a cool ball to kick or cones for them to go around, or something else that is motivating for them to move, a way for them to move. So I think sometimes kicking things is motivating. Also, for the child who tends to sink into the supporting surfaces, we recommend these move and sit cushions. They come in adult sizes and kid sizes, but I find that everybody can pretty much fit on these smaller sizes. The one that is shaped like a wedge in the back is for a kid who does something we call sacral sitting. Sacral sitting, where they're sitting way back and they have curved their spine into a C, and they're actually sitting on their sacrum, which is part of the spine, instead of sitting right up on their butt bones. So this helps tilt the pelvis forward in the chair into a more functional and alert position. If C sitting or sacral sitting is not a problem, then the red cushion is good too. Also depends on the shape of the chair. If you're in a cube chair, you got to use that blue move and sit cushion. We have all of these things at school, and they're being used all the time to optimize attention and posture for your kids. Rebounders, we're not using these so much in school anymore. I recommend them a lot for home. You don't necessarily need that bar. What's nice about the bar is sometimes I think kids catch a little bit more air and they involve their upper body a little bit more, which is a good thing. Also, if somebody's a little bit insecure about bouncing, it can give them some security. So either way, I usually find these for $20 to $30 at any sporting goods store. I wait for the sale, and in the days past, I bought stacks of them. When I saw them on sale, I'd buy six of these things, with school funding. However, these days we're not really recommending these in school anymore because we're afraid of injury. So just to show you what our awesome looking trampoline looks like these days, this is made out of river raft stuff, and it's extremely tough. And you can see it's extremely safe. It's like a big bubble to jump in. That kid's catching a lot of air. And the other cool thing about this is that you can roll it over completely upside down, and then you've got another one of those nice little hidey holes for your tactically defensive person. And the blue part then is on top, and it becomes like a little nest for a kid to climb up into. So climbing and bouncing fun with this, and this is a lot more expensive than a rebounder, but it's designed especially for institutional use, and we give it a workout daily. Also recommended for the person with proprioceptive issues is heavy work, and heavy work is anything that happens against resistance. So that can be worked into many parts of life. My favorite is, this is another one that we talked about. It's universal. It's organizing for overreactors and underreactors. So if you're droopy and you need to pep up, heavy work. Or if you're hyper and you need to chill, heavy work. So this little guy is moving the recycle bin out to the curb. Thank you, guy. So especially for a person who is habitually too much motion or habitually not enough motion, having a chore where they get to be a citizen in the home or at school, that's good stuff. We really, really like them to have pro-social outlets for the kind of energy and therapeutic intervention that they need. So there's lots and lots. I've got a handout for everybody at school, but there's lots and lots of things that kids can do. They can pull another kid in a wagon. They can stack cans in the cupboard. They can bring the gallon of milk in from the car. They can help push the vacuum cleaner is another really fun one for them to do. They love it. Or even, sometimes I suggest to people, if there's a couch and, you have two positions, position A for the couch and position B. Position B is 1 foot down. And you say, can you come help me push the couch to position B? And here you've got this little mite just working their heart out, pushing it down 1 foot. You can help them a little bit if they need some help, but let them put their whole body into it. And then you vacuum, and great job. Can you move it back into position A for me? At school, we push cube chairs around so that we get a lot of friction on the carpet. Kids can do a chair push-up where they put their arms down on the arms of the chair and lift themselves up so that their bottom is coming out of the chair, so they're using their own body weight. But hanging from one's arms, climbing, all of those kinds of things are against weight, and they are universally organizing for all children and all adults too, folks. Here's a little guy who's a citizen too. Look at him helping with that weighted thing in his arms. Little kids can carry big, heavy things, and don't they love to do it? Okay, I see lots of students, especially those with autism, who are experimenting with their vision and who have differences in vision. Some preoccupation with smaller parts of larger things. Some use of different kind of use of their peripheral vision, where they're kind of looking out of the corners of their eyes or looking up into the rafters of a room to try to get some sense of the space that they're in. Also difficulty filtering. So this is a student who may look hyperactive because they're going from one thing to another, or they're being visually led around the room, and each thing that falls into their vision they run to and then run to the next thing, so they appear quite hyperactive. Also, I have a theory that height seeking is about visual experimentation or visual input. It kind of gives you a thrill to get up high, and kind of experimenting with that. And my other theory is on flapping. If we have a child who's flapping their hands next to their face and eyes, sometimes that is because they're trying to create static in their peripheral vision, or scramble, and it helps them narrow their vision to a focal point in the middle. It's like shutting off the peripheral and enhancing the focal vision. My theories. We know lots of students who do this. When I see toys that are lined up just so, that tells me that we have a person who is trying to create order. There may be some sensory confusion, some sensory overwhelm, and a way to help get that organized is to organize one's environment. And this can give a kid a real feeling of, it's like a very calming, soothing thing to do, is to put your toys in order like this. There's nothing wrong with this at all. And I think a lot of empathy can come into play here. When we see this, we know you're telling me that it's a lot right now, and it's very organizing and calming for you to put them in order this way. So encourage it. Visual distractions can be affected if you use a study carrel. That works really nicely. I like the one on the left because it occludes more of her vision. She can see her paper and her reference book and her pencil and what she's doing there right in front of her, and not much else. That works out pretty good. The one on the right see, to me, her head's still out, so she can still be distracted by everything that's going on in the room. So this is good if you're trying to hide someone's eyes if they're taking a test and you want to make sure that the answers aren't being seen. But in terms of occluding vision, I think it needs to be a little higher. Other tips might be wearing a hat with a visor. Consider letting that be okay all day, or even indoors. You know, sometimes we take hats away from kids when they come indoors, but actually it's terrific in limiting the amount of peripheral information coming to a kid. Auditory, again, it can be hard to filter what's important. The sound of the light buzzing, the sound of the person talking, the sound of the people next to you having a sidebar conversation off task, and a toilet flushing down the hall. I'm hearing all those things at equal volume, and I'm giving them all equal import. It's very hard for me to know which one to pay attention to, and guess what? I missed the directions. So again, a lot of empathy for the child who has difficulty with this. Again, we have to wonder, a child who makes a lot of vocalizations or screams, is that an effort to control the auditory environment? Maybe. When one screams loudly, the muscles in the inner ear contract so that things are not as loud, so that your own scream, you don't deafen yourself with your own scream, your ears adjust automatically. Are students, when they're making loud screaming, are they trying to shut down what's going on with their ears? Or are they trying to control the auditory environment in some other way? Yeah, maybe. We really don't know. That is why a lot of empathy is called for here. I'm just going to advance to the next slide. Yeah, these headphones, sometimes known as gun muffs, or sort of a sound canceling or sound reducing headphone, they're extremely low tech. I purchased them at Harbor Freight, I can't think of what it's called, hardware store, and I can get them as cheaply as $2.99 for a pair of these. They do a couple things. One thing they do is they give your head a nice squeeze, which, as we know, that squeezing input can be very calming and organizing. The same input as a hug, the same input as rubbing or patting away a tickle or a cobweb. All of that input, that squeezing input, can be nice. And for kids, you know, our kids sometimes can't tell us what's going on, or they don't have the insight to let us know, I have a headache, or my sinuses are uncomfortable, or whatever. So the headphones can give them a nice squeeze on their head, which feels good. It also does dampen the sound. And the third thing it does is empower. I find that if you purchase a pair of headphones and you say, Johnny, these are for you, I'm going to write your name on them, I'm going to hang them right here on the doorknob where you can reach them. And then what things that typically bother Johnny, you say, Johnny, I need to run the blender. Do you want to wear your headphones? Would you like to be the guy who works the on-off switch on the blender while I stand here and supervise you? That empowerment, I think, helps kids a lot who are overwhelmed by sounds. When I say reduce space, this is like, again, back to the tent. That can be a nice strategy that reduces some of the auditory that's going on. Instead of being in a big gym or a big warehouse store or Target, smaller space like the car can be more organizing for a young person. And then, of course, reducing noise. If you're in an environment that's just too much, sometimes you have to get out of there. Selective eating. This is ubiquitous among young children that I see. It's just very, very common among typically developing children and also not typically developing children. I have a whole talk on selective eating or picky eating. It definitely may have a sensory basis, and we definitely have a way forward that is extremely effective. I've had tremendous success. I've had lots of feedback from families who said that it was really worked for them. This is a multifaceted problem. It's medical, it's sensory, and it's emotional. It has to do with family dynamics. It's actually outside the scope of this talk, but I do encourage you to see the other talk on picky eating, available also on YouTube through the OT page. Okay, vestibular issues. One is height seeking. We have lots of kids who like to climb on furniture, which is climbing as a proprioceptive function, but climbing high and looking around and stimulating your vision and all those things, especially without regard to safety, can be a vestibular issue. Also, students or young people, your child may not have the appropriate safety reactions, so that when they're displaced in one direction, they throw their hands out to protect themselves. And the other thing, vestibular is frequently used for calming. So this is when you'll see a person rocking. And it can be used for calming either by the child themselves. They figure out that rocking is organizing for them, or we can give them a rocking chair or some other rocking horse, or, this child is rocking in a different way to help them calm and organize. Safety is the key with height seeking. Lots of supervision and typical reactions not being present. Again, making sure that play areas are matted or soft, and that we're not rushing a child who needs time to step over a threshold or move from carpet to tile or those kinds of things. I think I just talked about that. Oh, they do need lots of opportunities for practice and for playful fun. That's when you start to think about one of the clinics like we saw at the beginning of this talk, where it showed what a sensory integration clinic looks like. Outdoor playgrounds, indoor playgrounds, movement opportunities, backyard, climbing on the picnic bench or whatever else you have going on in your yard, making a little ramp, those kinds of things. Lots of opportunities for trying and playing in a non-rushed, playful way. Multisensory environments are a problem for so many students that I know. A multisensory environment can be defined as one that has lots of different kinds of input, like fluorescent lights and lots of colors and lots to look at, and maybe an overhead PA speaker or something like that, and people talking, and maybe some smells, and then also a requirement for behavior. So the examples I give for places like that are shopping. Add to that the acoustics of a great big store like that. Classrooms are multisensory environments that can be tough for lots of kids. And then family holidays can be a big problem because, again, there's a lot going on and there's a demand for behavior, like, please go give your Aunt Millie some sugar. So, you're expected to hug and kiss people that you don't see that frequently, or you may be uncomfortable with light moving touch, so you don't really like hugs. So we have lots of strategies for multisensory environments. One is reduced the length of time that you're in the environment. Like, you might not stay for 6 hours of Thanksgiving. You might stay for 45 minutes of Thanksgiving dinner, and then have an opportunity to go to a time-in zone, which is someplace where you have things that are calming and organizing for you, that it's away from everything else. So maybe if everybody's in the living room, you can go in the TV room, or if everybody's in the TV room, you can go into a bedroom. There's lots of places like little hidey holes, like under tents, or in a closet with the closet door open but underneath the clothing, that could be quiet and calming. Sometimes we see kids naturally run under tables. Is there some little hidey hole at the end of the couch where a kid could be, where they could see someone coming that would help them get organized? And no judgment, no problem. We're going to visit you there. You're going to come out and have dinner with us, and then go back to playing where you're playing. And comfort activities and objects, obviously. So a time-in zone, what's there? Well, some borders or some kind of limits that help you understand the space. And then quiet, maybe those noise-canceling headphones, or maybe headphones with music in them. Light that's not too bright or intrusive. There could be fidgets or favorite loveys in there, like a blanket. Limited size, you want it to be kind of like a tiny, cozy little hidey hole. A limited number of people, like there can be rules like only 2 people can go in there at once, but there's no demands like when you go in there you have to put the puzzle together, or you have to complete your worksheet when you're in there, or whatever. You have to be working on whatever when you're in there. There would be some rules like you can listen to music, but you have to keep the volume on number 1 or number 2, but no higher than that. Does that make sense? Or you can have 3 fidgets out at a time. So those are rules, but not demands. Here's an example that I was trying to talk about earlier, a way to get underneath a table and have some calming, organizing input. And this child's, the weight of her own body pulls that tablecloth in around her so that it kind of gives her a little squeeze. And she's got her arms out there on the side. If she pushes with her arms, she's going to get some muscle work while she's doing that. So she can experiment with that. She can see people coming, but it's kind of solitary to be in a hammock like that. Here's another cool little spot, little place to feel calm and organized and safe. This is a really fancy one. I like these bed tents. I think this is a really good idea. This one looks like it's about to blast off to the moon. But they have lots of character ones and other ones, and they're really pretty inexpensive. And once you get in there, you know nobody's going to sneak up on you, and you're in there alone. It's kind of an awesome feeling for a person who may have some sensory overwhelm. So our goals in using sensory strategies are, number 1, always to keep a child safe. So if you have a child engaging in unsafe behaviors, how can we channel those into pro-social situations? We want the child to be comfortable so that they're ready to learn, and we want to have them be age appropriate. So as a child grows, think about other activities and things that they can do that won't look or seem that weird. Recently we had that thing of fidget spinners, and everybody had fidget spinners, and those were for bigger kids. So having sensory interventions is not that unusual, and it's pretty accepted. And if you think about an office, there's usually somebody making a paperclip chain during a meeting, or doodling, or fiddling with their hair, or whatever else, looking at cell phones. So those are all age-appropriate sensory things that people are doing. And our overall goal is to create a fun childhood for your little kid, and for all the little kids who are passing through our program, for persons with ASD and for persons in the early childhood program. So how we handle questions is, you're not with me now, but I'm available through email, and my email address will be in the commentary description section below this video presentation. I thank you so much for your attention and for taking the time to watch this, and I welcome problem solving specifically for your child as you contact me. So thank you again.